Welcome everyone to today's Science Cafe on gerontology and special populations. Before we get into the session, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the CTSC for those that are on the call that aren't familiar. So the goal of the CTSC is to improve the health and health equity of people who are living in Northern Ohio by providing resources and services to our hospital and university partners, clinical and translational researchers and scientists, as well as community members. The CTSC is currently doing this by focusing on these 5 key areas and initiatives, which include resources and services, community engagement, workforce development, clinical and translational funding opportunities, and health informatics. And so today I'd like to introduce our content expert. We have with us Margy Sanders, who is from Northeast Ohio Medical University, where she's the Associate Director for the Office of Palliative Care, as well as the Associate Director for the Office of Geriatrics. She's very busy with all of the exciting work that she's doing, and I'm sure she'll share some of that with us today. So I will turn it over to you, Margy.
Thank you. So I'm going to quickly put up a disclaimer. Okay, Mackenzie, it doesn't want to.
2 minutes, but just 2 more minutes.
There. Okay, now it will. I want to put this acknowledgement up because I'm going to be talking a little bit about our HRSA grant, our GWEP grant, Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program. And so just this quick acknowledgement that it's part of a $5 million grant from HRSA over 5 years. So there we have it. Our objectives are going to be, and I really hope that this can be interactive. I have never liked to just be the person speaking to people. I like to have conversations, and I'm hoping we can do that. So we're going to talk about changing demographics, recognizing the uniqueness of this population particularly, and the implications of that aging population. Also, we're going to talk about how our Ohio GWEP is addressing the needs of the educational needs, particularly of this aging population. So we're going to start out with some demographics because I think these may surprise you. They certainly have me. And I've presented this to students and professionals in other places, but just a few years ago in 2020, 1 in 6 people were 65 and over. But by 2040, and that's just a skip away, they will be 22% of the US population. So the aging population is growing exponentially. Some demographic realities. So there's something called Peak 65. Peak 65 is kind of a historic time. It's a surge with every day we baby boomers, and I can say that because I am, are turning 65 each day. And this is from 2024 through 2027. So 11,000 Americans turn 65 each day. And the fact that by 2050, 1 in 6 people in the world, so not just in the US, the Peak 65 is in the US, but we're talking about in the entire world. 1 in 6 people will be 65 or over, and that's up from 1 in 11 in the last census. Some of the other demographic realities is that the old are going to be the folks that are growing the fastest. The number of people 85 and older will triple by 2040, and centenarians will quadruple by 2054. So we know the oldest of the old are the ones who are needing the most assistance, the most care, the most services, medical services. So keep that one in your back pocket, because I think that's I think that's a very important statistic for us to be aware of. And of course, we all know that older women outnumber older men. So ladies on here, find a younger man, at least 6 or 7 years younger than you. So you can kind of age together well. But in 2020, this is the chart that really talks about it. But look by the last column, 85 plus, there are 56 men to every 100 women. Think about that for a minute. So amongst women 75 and older, 42% live alone. Men tend to try to remarry. And I will tell you from everything I've read in the past, I didn't put it up here, but married people are healthier and actually live longer. So that's just something else to put in your back pocket if you haven't thought about doing that. In 2022, almost 6 million people 65 plus live below the poverty level, although that has increased since like the 30s when older adults had a much higher poverty level. And these are the median incomes for females. It's almost $10,000 less than it is for males. So that's something I'll talk to you a little in a few minutes about a little more. But retired workers, and that's something that people 65 and over, although the Social Security age, I think, is going up is now 67 to collect your full benefits. But again, there's a disparity between males and females for what they're collecting in Social Security. 2020 for males and 1638 for females. Well, Mackenzie, it wants you to do. Okay. So the National Council on Aging also has found that half of all women and 7 in 10 low-income women were not confident that they could plan and save for their retirement. I will tell you that I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon. And by my age, by the number of birthdays I have celebrated, I could. But it's not to be. Older racial and ethnic minority populations, this is, I think, interesting, will increase 123% compared to 50% for non-white or non-Hispanic populations by 2060. So, and they're projecting that by 2044, the majority minority milestone will be met. And that is the time when the majority ethnic group, non-Hispanic white people, becomes one of multiple minorities. So there will be a shift. No, it's telling, sorry, I'm really sorry, Mackenzie. Thank you. So the older population, I'm going to tell you, if you've seen one older adult, and you know this, you've seen one older adult. They are a very heterogeneous group of individuals, and they're a combination truly of multiple forces. No, thank you. What makes them unique? The things that make them unique are people being involved, maintaining that vital involvement in their communities, in their families, in the workforce. Also maintaining a sense of autonomy. And I think that's because, and I've said this many times, the baby boomers, want it, and they want it now. We're a generation of Verucas from Willy Wonka. Um, but that sense of autonomy serves us well as we get older, because we will fight for what we need, fight for what we want and what's right. So I think that, and I'm making gross generalizations here, but there's, as a population. So older adults are very wonderful at reflecting on meaning and then moving forward, accepting one's past. We do, after a certain age, you start looking at your life, that life review comes into play, and it helps you to come to terms with your own mortality. So that is something that is done in this population. The other thing that I think is really important is what spirituality, which is truly what gives meaning to one's life. It's characterized by that, having faith, it's being able to love and forgive, to worship, to see beyond present circumstances. And it really does enable a person who is having losses to transcend them, to transcend suffering. So spirituality is very important. Also self-worth. So, and again, I think particularly the baby boomer generation they have been instilled with self-worth. They were children products after the World War II, and they were extremely loved and wanted, and parents did things for their kids that maybe not every generations before were not able to do. Not that they didn't want to, they weren't able to. But some of the things that this resulted in is really self-worth, a good sense of self-worth, and supporting others is part of that self-worth. People feel better, and we all know that people feel better about themselves when you're helping someone else. It helps our physical and emotional well-being for sure. And then our personal control and morale. It's really hard to be down when you're doing something for someone else. And so that's why so many older adults are in the volunteer community who don't need to have a financial compensation. This is a great compensation. And it does reduce the risk of mortality. Something else, that sense of control provides a resource, and they can draw upon it as they confront the challenges of aging. And we're talking about the challenges of loss, of perhaps losing a spouse, losing children, your whatever you may have had as feeling really strong value about your career. If you've retired, that may be gone. So it's that giving back really does help with personal autonomy. Therefore, many older adults are much more resilient than sometimes we give them credit for. They can maintain a positive sense of well-being and display courage and adaptability. They have, in their lifetimes, they have seen more changes, particularly the old have seen more changes than we yet have, and than we probably will, with technological changes, particularly. I mean, if you ever want to have a wonderful conversation, find a 95 or 100-year-old and that you can talk about. I remember when might have been 5 or 10 cars on the road. It was wonderful. There was not such a thing as traffic. So yes, I have to share. there are those of us, and I'm sure there are some of us on this meeting that have just always had a fondness for older adults. How many had a relationship with your grandparents? You can just answer now. How many folks? Anybody want to share a special relationship with an older adult in your life? All right. Well, I was hoping we could have kind of a conversation, but we will later. All right. Th Thanks. Mackenzie, go ahead.
Oh, I just saw in the chat, Chris actually
Ah,
said yes with all
awesome.
4 grandparents.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I'm not seeing the chat because thanks, Chris. Yes, and it does. And I know I know Chris, and I know she has an affinity for older adults, and it does matter. And so those of you who may have grandchildren, make those try whatever you can to build those relationships with your grandchildren. I am blessed to have my 5 grandchildren all very close to me, and it's been the best thing that could have ever happened. I am truly blessed for that. We took a trip this summer to my 4 adult grandchildren and I went out west and hit 8 national parks. So, and we're building memories and do that. I just have to say, try to do that, please. It's the best legacy you can leave them. Okay. Widowhood. I'm just trying to hit on some of these really quickly, but it is the most distressing of all life events. And of course, there are 3 times as many widows as widowers. So because women do live longer, and it is truly a significant predictor of depression. And it may produce not only depression, but anxiety as a reaction to that partner's loss. Also, the changing roles and responsibilities. I have worked as a social worker in a senior community many years ago, and there were women whose husbands passed and they had never written a check. That was something that he did. So imagine at 84, 85, learning, and I know things are all done online now, but that's even a whole nother level of trying to understand something that you're not familiar with. So there are many changes, but also that loss of a confidant, that loss of a partner, that loss of intimacy with someone, and not, sexual as well as just touch. So many people that are isolated by themselves, and don't have that. And it is not good for our psyche. It is not good for us as humans. And we need to recognize that too. No. The risk for suicide. So older adults have the highest rate of suicide in the US. And it is white men who are 85 that have the highest completion rate. So if an older adult comes to you and is contemplating taking their lives, please take it seriously, because they probably will. And particularly if it's an older man. But, what is making them do that? So yes, depression is, but their perception of the fact that they may be a burden to their families, and that their health is declining, and that's going to be a future burden, even more so. People don't sleep as well, particularly after the death of a spouse. Increasing pain and hopelessness, and I think most of all, loneliness. So these are if you see these in your patients, and sometimes they're not going to everything's fine. But ask, and I know that's hard to do, but get your, that's why interdisciplinary teams for geriatrics are the very best, because you can have a social worker talk to them. You can do a psych consult, something that particularly older men tend not to want to show their vulnerabilities. So, okay, next one. And one that, gosh, this one brought me to our former GEC, Geriatric Education Center, that was at Case. And I worked with Dr. Georgia Annetzberger, who helped write the elder abuse law in Ohio. But elder mistreatment does happen, and it does threaten everything from health to dignity to economic security. And it is all of those shown. It is physical, sexual, emotional, neglect, abandonment, and financial exploitation. I will tell you, it is grossly underreported. And people ask that. It's like, well, is it like child abuse? That seems to be pretty well reported, but you have children who are out and about, who are in schools. Older adults are, generally in their homes. And and if someone asks, they may tend to say, no, I'm not being abused. They don't see it as abuse. And many times it's because the perpetrators are often family members or caregivers, or someone that older adult trusts. And they don't want to believe that their grandson is, taking their Social Security checks every month, that, something like that is happening. But I think this is a high stat. At 1 in 10 older adults may experience some sort of abuse. And for every one case that's reported, at least 24 go unreported. The ones that do get reported pretty often are the self-neglect. That's the one that's most commonly reported. And that's because the neighbor may report that, or a child that comes in from out of town may say, Mom is not, it seems like the house is a mess. She hasn't cleaned. She hasn't bathed. And even neighbors will make those reports. And so that's why I think those are the most commonly reported events. And I want to make this a point that it occurs across all socioeconomic groups, cultures, and races. It's an equal opportunity offender. Okay. Family caregiving. Okay. Anybody here willing to at least talk about has anyone had been a family caregiver of an older family member? And you can jump on and say it, or you can put it in the chat. Because as professionals, folks in healthcare still are those who are caring for their loved ones. And when you look at this stat that family and friends provide, thank you, Kelly. If you don't mind, I'll just repeat that you cared for your dad for 6 years before he passed. That's a wonderful gift. And I know it comes with challenges. Family and friends provide 80% of all long-term care services, and it's a lot of money. It's about $400 billion. Gordon, your aunt and, oh, good. Does anybody want to, I know you're putting things in the chat. would anyone like to share with the group, like what their experience? Thank you, Laura.
Good morning, afternoon.
Yes.
We're just gonna comment that I'm a part of the sandwich generation. While my parents are still independent, helping take care of them if they have doctor's appointments or surgeries, and then, of course, young children in that as well. So dealing with both sides of that now, obviously foreseeing what's going to be happening with them in a couple years, the burden of that is certainly not lost.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, Margy. I can also talk about caring for my dad with my siblings. There are 7 of us, and the burden was on some more than others. So that caused kind of a strain in our family, because he was absolutely adamant about not going to a nursing home. So that really left, the burden on us to not, he wasn't a burden, but the care sometimes could be.
Can I ask you, Jerry, did people have roles in your family? Did certain,
Very much.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest, and I have my oldest sister, definitely was the 3rd parent in our family. My mom passed away before my dad, so she took, I would say, the majority of that. She also lived nearest to him. So, it was definitely, the roles come out always when you're home anyway. But it really seemed to be very prominent. Our roles really became prominent when he was sick.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And luckily you have there are a lot of siblings, which I think helps too.
I was just going to volunteer.
Thanks.
My 2 oldest siblings, sort of like Jerry said, took on more of the job of caregiver for both my parents at different times. And I was sort of the backup person if they needed to go out of town. And so I was only there for maybe a week at a time as the full caregiver, but it was the hardest week of my life. And yes, both my parents, because of safety reasons, had to be placed in they're nursing homes, really. Once the family members basically were read the riot act, that they're not safe at home anymore, and you can't keep them safe at home anymore.
And I hope for, both of you and anyone else who has done that caregiving, that you've had someone that you could talk to while this was going on. It's really, I have also been there and I know how difficult it is. And you have to have your tribe who you can kind of vent to when you need to, or sometimes just to discuss things that you may not be able to discuss with your siblings. I know there was some other in the chat. Wow. Gordon, thank you. Yeah, so the home health aide came in 3 days a week, and that probably certainly eased the burden on your aunt and your mom.
It did.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Yes.
What we normally do, it kind of helped. So my aunt, she only lived in, or I'm sorry, my grandmother, she only lived in Sandusky, and then my aunt lived in Toledo, my mom lived in Cleveland. So then between, you could get someone either coming from the east or west to go to Sandusky and just check on her, and then with all the grandkids too, we could all just drop in on her as well. So it kind of made things a lot easier. Just delegating little tasks, and 9 times out of 10, one of my cousins was either going to, Toledo or Sandusky that weekend anyway. So it was always easy to just stop by and, check in on my grandmother.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Perry Ann, I see your mom is 93, has dementia and lives alone, and you have a daytime caregiver, again, 3 times a week. But there you have, it is very hard to find trustworthy caregivers to come into the home, to show up. Yeah, Rini, go ahead.
Thank you for offering the space for people to share. I'm a second generation immigrant. So my parents moved from India to Canada, and I was born in Canada, and then I moved to the US. So I'm a double immigrant, if you will. It's really interesting to have this conversation because my mom is, getting up there in age, and my brother still lives in Toronto, and she lives in Toronto. But a lot of my generation of immigrant kids whose parents moved from wherever, and then they were born here in North America, we struggle a lot. And I see them struggle because we don't have the established sort of support network. We don't have extended family members who live here. So no cousins, no, nephews, nieces, or anybody. And that burden or that worry is especially multiplied when the child, like in my case, me, we move away from where our parents live because of whatever jobs and stuff. And then, as Laura talked about, being the sandwich generation, where I have little kids of my own, and then my mom lives in Toronto, it's a lot to sort of navigate. And then our communities are not also known as those where the parents have a lot of, I don't know how to put this without it come across as weird, but like we struggle with our parents I guess everybody does this, has this, to listen to us or take us seriously as we get older. Like, yeah, now I actually do know more than you, Mom, just listen to me maybe sometimes. It's a lot to try to navigate long distance with no support network present.
I hope you can, find some support with friends here, with maybe people from your faith community that are here, but you deserve that support. Oh, Laura, you are so right. Parents don't like to be parented. That is exactly correct. But try to find some network so that you're not so stressed that you're here and she's there. That's, they're there. That's my recommendation. At least have friends. And I'm sure you may be one of the few of your friends who doesn't have a lot of family here, but in the university, in the medical setting, there are tons of people that have moved away from their families. So see if you can find a group of folks that are like-minded and kind of going through the same things you are. Just a recommendation. Kit. Oh.
Hey, Margy, did you call me?
No, I thought your green light was on, so I thought you wanted to say something. Indeed, the Alzheimer's Association has wonderful support groups if it's a dementia issue, but sometimes it's just other kinds of health issues. Yeah, you are not, do not ever think you're alone. There are plenty of support groups out there. And if it is dementia, the Alzheimer's Association has a wonderful support group. Many of them. Okay, do we want to, so $4 billion a year is what informal caregiving is valued at. That's a lot of money. And I think, thank you, Kit. Yes, everyone's stories. And the thing is, our stories are unique. They are ours, but people can always see something else of them in your story. So it's wonderful to share those. All right, well, the next slide, please, Mackenzie. Well, and I think we're not surprised in this. The majority of caregivers are female, about 61%, but male caregivers are on the increase. So we have become a little more balanced in that. And when you talk about the sandwich generation, the average age of a caregiver is 49. So many have children and parents that they're caring for at the same time. But 1 in 10 are 75 years or older. So that also is, so that's generally an older person taking care of another older person. And sometimes it works out fine for couples because you have two people with some sort of disability, but putting them together, you have one whole person, and you really find out how solid and strong that bond was when one of them ends up in the hospital for a certain length of time, because without each other, one may be the voice of the other, one may be able to do the physical attributes for the couple. So, and the caregiver role lasts on an average 4 years, but a quarter of people have been caregiving for 5 years or more. So, and it's not just an occasional thing. Most caregiving is provided for about 24 and a half hours a week. And about a quarter of those provide 41, about another quarter provide 41 or more hours a week. That's a full-time job. And many folks are doing this while trying to maintain a full-time job. So, you know, the family caregiving is something that is a gift. It's beneficial. It's helping the caregiver give back to that parent or grandparent that they've loved and who's given them so much. But we also have to be cognizant of the burden that it does put. So, and so that the last stat there, the number of people providing care in addition to working outside the household has increased from 1 in 7 to 1 in 5 today. So there is definitely a need for, as someone said, getting home health folks in the house, in the home, that are reliable and well-trained. And so that leads me to talk a little bit about what our Ohio GWEP is doing to address the needs of the aging population, particularly with education. So it's an educational grant. It's the Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program. It's a 5-year grant. There are 42 GWEPs funded nationally, and we are the one for the state of Ohio. So we're the only one in Ohio. The overall goal of the GWEP is to educate and train primary care and geriatric workforces, and that includes paraprofessionals and interprofessional healthcare faculty, interprofessional students, patients, family caregivers, and other appropriate specialties to provide age-friendly and dementia-friendly care for older adults in an integrated geriatric and primary care sites and delivery systems. Okay, Mackenzie. So I'm sorry, I think this is a little small, but what I'm going to talk, we have an overall goal of the GWEP is to educate and train, and our team meets this goal by implementing a series of GWEP education hubs across the state of Ohio, which they have been designed for self-sufficiency in staggered 2-year training cycles. So we have established a GWEP super hub at Neomed. And it's with our firm. So that you know, we had a GWEP the past 5 years as well. So we've been working on this for a number of years with many of the same partners. And so we have a pretty well established group of individuals who have learned to trust and work together beautifully. But what we'll do is our super hub, we're going to be mentoring new hubs throughout the state. And they're going to be in our partner academic institutions, and they're going to do educational programming that meets the objectives that you see there, if you can even see them. But one is to develop reciprocal partnerships between academia, primary care sites, and delivery systems, community organizations, and to transform clinical training environments into integrated geriatric and primary care sites and delivery systems that are age-friendly and dementia-friendly. So one of the sub-objectives that you see there is to establish collaborative relationships, and we're all about building relationships with they're called T-tours. It's tribal organizations, underserved or rural primary care sites, and community-based programs. Our next is to train faculty and preceptors at the hubs using a train-the-trainer approach to deliver all aspects of the education after a 2-year training and mentoring process. So the final objective for the first objective is work through primary care clinical training T-tour sites to become age-friendly and dementia-friendly. And our second objective is to provide interprofessional geriatric clinical training and education to students, residents, fellows, faculty, and preceptors. So everybody you can think of in T-tour, those tribal organizations or underserved or rural sites, primary care sites, with the intent to have them practice in these sites upon completion of their program. So one of the sub-objectives there is we're going to be doing an 8-week geriatric practicum. And it's going to build on, we have something that we developed over the last GWEP, which was a geriatric resource course. We're building on that. And folks will also be placed in the T-tour sites. So we'll have medicine, social work, nursing for the targeted folks. But in the meantime, we're also doing community-wide events. And so we do something in Akron with an underserved population. We're also doing, we're going to be having an intergenerational senior prom hosted at Neomed. So we're going to be trying, to do those kinds of activities. We like a good party. Also, we are working with our CTSC partners, and what we're doing with them is we're training community health workers to have, actually it's going to be like a micro-credentialing. They already have an apprentice program, and so working with our CTSC, and I'm actually on the workforce pod. So we're going to be helping to train community health workers who have an interest in working with older adults. Years ago, I did some training with community health workers, and I will tell you, they have been some of the most amazing students who wanted to just learn. And many of them had wonderful stories about their own families and grandparents and what they were doing for caregiving. So my hope is that they will be wonderful with, getting that certificate, and hoping that they will continue to perhaps beef up the care of older adults by paraprofessionals. So, and if you want to hit the next one there. So, and here's who's on these are our GWEP partners. So we have academic partners, and Cleveland State is one. Our next partner who will be one of the hubs is Ohio, or no, the next one actually is going to be the Ohio State University. So they're one of our, they're a sub-awardee for our grant. Also OU, the University of Akron, and of course Neomed. And then our health system partners are Summa Health and Lewis Stokes VA. Is going to be a practicum site. And then our T-Tour clinical sites. So they're all FQHCs. And so that's federally qualified health centers. And that is Alliance Family Health Center, and they're in a rural community. Community Support Services, that's their entire name. Access Point FQHC, Asia Inc. FQHC. Ohio State has their Total Health and Wellness FQHC, and OU has their Hopewell Health Center. And so we did get their logos up there for folks. And then we have a number of community-based organizations. So the Alzheimer's Association, BRI, and if you don't know about BRI, and Rini, you may get some support from folks at BRI, but anybody who's in the local area, they have been doing community outreach for a very long time. And the other recommendation is also our area agencies on aging, Direction Home Area Agency on Aging. We're partnered with the Akron Canton organization, and also with Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging, and Habitat for Humanity, because that's something that many older adults want to stay in their homes, and they actually, as partners of us, it helped them to be able to get another large grant to help modify homes so people could stay in them. And so we have someone that goes out and not just a construction person, but someone from PT goes out and does a scan of the house to see what really needs to be done. And also the Ohio Council for Cognitive Health. And they do a wonderful job providing information to the community and to individuals on dementia friends. And so, and those trainings are available. If anyone is interested in any of that, please reach out to me. We can send you information and would love to, be able to help you out. So the next page, I think, is just our references. And if anyone has any other, yes, Shannon.
Hi, Margie. Thanks so much for this. This was fantastic. And I loved the unique implications that you shared earlier in your talk. I'll share. So one of the aims of the CTSC is to recruit all populations into clinical research studies and clinical trials. Could you share, based on some of the unique implications that you talked about earlier, what are some of your insights on how we could recruit aging populations into clinical research studies and clinical trials?
I think there are more older adults who are more generous of spirit because they may be more, often clinical trials are frightening to people because it's like, what's going to happen 20 years from now? Are there going to be effects that I didn't realize? Somebody that's 78 years old is probably going to say, this might be worthy. So it's getting out into the community with people. It's being involved with community events where older adults might be present. It's, I think, also for the CTSC, it's looking to do some outreach maybe to places like Benjamin Rose or our area agencies on aging, but we can certainly help to make those connections. We'd be happy to make those connections. Yeah, I think it may be easy. It's just getting to, faith communities are a wonderful place to find people who might be interested. And if you can find a faith leader in there, because again, there's a trust issue with a number of communities. And if a faith leader believes in what you're doing, then you're going to have a foot in the door, so to speak. Oh, you know what? That slide, what happened here? That slide, I'm going to type in my email. There it is, for anyone that would like it. Any other questions, comments? Well, I really thank you all, honestly, for sharing open and honestly. I think that we learn most from each other. And again, we're all in this together, folks. And thank you. Thank you all for your attention and your willingness to participate.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Margie. I just wanted to take a minute before we end the session, just to highlight some of the QR codes that are on the screen right now. So on the left side, you can see this is the registration for next month, where we will be focusing on ethical issues in translational science. That's on March 13th at noon. The middle QR code is to provide feedback on this session, but there's also space there for you to suggest either a content expert or a topic in general that you'd be interested in seeing in an upcoming Science Cafe. And then, of course, the right QR code is a space where you can become a member of the CTSC so you can stay up to date with all of the great things that are going on. And then I don't see any other questions. If there's any final thoughts or comments before we sign off, now would be the time. I just see a lot of thank yous. This was a really great session.
Thank you. Wouldn't have been great without you guys. And before there was one thing when I was trying so hard to get on before, I need to thank that there wouldn't have been any PowerPoints at all if it weren't for Denise Kropp. So I really needed to let her know, to acknowledge her. So thank you. And I see she's already off, so she didn't even hear it. Somebody who's on, please let her know. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.